Boa tarde, estamos no ar com mais um Enzima Live Show, o nosso programa bissemanal aqui no canal da Pluri, onde a gente fala sobre inovação, tecnologia, mundo digital, startups, esportes eletrônicos, enfim, todos esses assuntos que a gente tanto ama, sempre recebendo profissionais relevantes das indústrias do esporte e do entretenimento para abrilhantar essas conversas aqui conosco. Antes de eu apresentar o nosso convidado especialíssimo de hoje, só lembrar a vocês que essas conversas aqui viram podcasts nas principais plataformas de podcast. Então, se por um acaso vocês quiserem, vocês podem ouvi-la também no Spotify, no Deezer e no Google Podcast. Como eu falei, convidado especialíssimo de hoje, Hisham Shehabi, ele que é cofundador e COO da N3xt Sports, uma consultoria especializada em inovação e tecnologia aplicadas ao esporte, é uma consultoria que tem sede em Washington e em Barcelona, mas que já tem uma atuação global muito importante, e o Hisham veio conversar aqui conosco sobre o trabalho que a empresa faz, alguns estudos de caso, veio falar também principalmente sobre o papel que a inovação tem na indústria esportiva, enfim, todos esses assuntos. So, Hisham, first of all, thanks for being here. Welcome to Enzima. It's a pleasure to have you here with us.
Boa tarde, Felipe. Thank you. Good to be with you.
That's great. That's great. So I would like to start asking you to tell us a little bit about your career before you started N3xt Sports.
Yeah, of course. So I started in investment banking in Bahrain, which is the country I come from in the Middle East. I did that for a couple of years before starting to work in the public domain. So I worked for a governmental agency that was looking to bring foreign direct investment to the country. After that, I started to work for the Bahrain Olympic Committee in a marketing role before moving to Switzerland to pursue a master's in sports and technology. And then beyond that, I started working at the International Olympic Committee. And in that role, I was in that role for about 4 years, where I went to Rio for the Olympic Games in 2016, which was beautiful. I actually did the 5 football cities in Brazil during that time.
Great.
And my role really at the IOC was to look at the future trends impacting sports and try to bring it into very kind of digestible policy-making content, let's say. So I worked a lot with research companies, with universities, with student capstone projects at, as they finished their master's or bachelor's degrees. I went to a lot of conferences and tried to digest all of that into, white papers, reports, presentations for our leadership within the IOC. And through that, I created a wonderful international network, which I named at the time an intelligence framework. And this allowed us as an institution to quickly understand what was happening in the market and translate that into action inside the organization. So I did that for 4 years, and throughout that process, I met my co-founders. First of all, Munir, my co-founder, was in the US Olympic Committee, and we collaborated on a project on behalf of the IOC. And kind of the ball started rolling on different topics before we decided with him and 3 other co-founders, Xabi Cortadellas, Jordi Albiol, and Francesco Bruni, to launch N3xt Sports, which we registered in spring 2018 and launched officially in September 2018.
Perfect. So explain to those who don't know what the company does, please.
Yeah, so I heard you initially saying it's a consulting company, which is correct. So we're a consulting company that is trying to rebalance the bargaining power in the industry. So in the last few years, you saw a lot of tech companies, like the big tech companies like Google and Amazon and Microsoft, coming into sports. You see a lot of competition from like content generating houses like Netflix. You see a lot of investors coming in, a lot of startups coming in, and all of this is very new for the sports industry. And so our role is really to create strategies that help sports organizations such as football clubs or leagues or Olympic committees or organizing committees of events to leverage new trends in the market and to create sustainable structures within their organization to deal with these issues on a constant basis. And we do this in 3 main pillars. So we do technology strategy, which includes digital transformation. investment strategy, so how to either attract investors or to invest as a sports organization, and then innovation strategies, which is really about how do I use the ecosystem that surrounds me as a sports organization to create new products, to create new services, and generally grow commercially. So that's kind of our role.
Perfect. And you are based in the US and also in Europe, right? You have two offices, right?
Yeah, so we're a US registered company, but we set up our headquarters in Barcelona, Spain, because we wanted to mainly serve the European market, but also the Middle Eastern market. I'm from the Middle East, my co-founder as well, one of them is from the Middle East, and we believe that a lot of the strategies we'd like to put in place are very, very relevant for sports organizations in the Middle East, and then the intention is to go farther east in the future.
Okay, so I have a more broad question now. I want to know, what is innovation to you, and especially why the sports industry should be putting innovation on the top of their priorities today?
Yeah, so I think, innovation is one of those buzzwords that, people throw around. It means many things to different people. In our company, it's a way of thinking. It's a culture. It's a methodology and a framework to harness ideas and to test ideas, pilot them, and scale them. This is what we call an innovation framework. And so for us, it's all about creating this mindset within a sports entity, so that all of the different kind of silos today within a sports entity are able to work together to create new value. So this type of thinking is very, very common today in like the pharmaceutical industry, in the automotive industry, and the financial industry, and many, many different other ones, where they are looking to move from like an insular R&D perspective. So like we have a research and development team that works for 3 years on a product and then comes to market to test it, to create a more open structure where we're tapping into kind of startups and universities and investment groups and ideas from across the world that can reduce that time from 3 years to 3 months, and also reduce the cost by testing it consistently. And this thought process is very, very important for sports, because we are no longer just about sports, we're a sportainment offering. And so if we're a sportainment offering, we need to adapt to consumer changes on a constant basis. And so we cannot wait and have a long product development process. We have to have a very, very short one. And so this type of thinking should be top of mind, I would say, for sports entities that want to find new ways of engaging fans, find new ways of extending the career of their athletes, of finding ways to be more close to their community. All of these things require new ways of thinking, and an innovation strategy could be very, very relevant for that.
Perfect. And as you mentioned, innovation is a hot topic in every industry now, but the other industries are much more developed than the sports industries. The sport industry. What are the challenges that you face when you try to work or to implement innovation in sports entities?
Many. I would say many, Felipe. But the one that really came to mind as you were asking the question is how sports entities think this is not their business. And more importantly than that, many sports entities believe that innovation is something you do when you have money. And when you have a budget, then you do innovation. It's like a nice to have. So this is a challenge for us sometimes when we speak to sports entities, because they believe that they are not the right customer for this, Whereas when we speak to them about what is possible with a managed, like a very transparent innovation, let's say, framework, they understand that actually even with small budgets or even no budgets, but just a different way of structuring the work, they can make stuff happen. And then today there's a lot of different stakeholders in sports, but also outside of sports, that are interested to partner with sports. So a lot of the time, what we're able to achieve with our clients is figuring out ways for them to tap into funds or to programs or initiatives that already exist, and to partner with them. So they don't actually have to spend money, but they can co-create something with, an accelerator or an incubator or a corporate venture arm, or a lot of like government programs that exist. You see now a lot of cross-country collaborations, between different soccer clubs. For example, just the other day, there was a soccer club in Spain and a soccer club a soccer club in Germany and a soccer club in the US that signed a partnership, and these are things that before they looked at themselves as competitors, but now they see themselves as partners, because there's so many different topics that are now that sports entities need to deal with.
Yeah, the deal that you mentioned is FC Cincinnati and Hoffenheim, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I believe that, I don't know if you agree, but I believe so. The main problem today, it's kind of a mentality problem, because people actually don't know what innovation is and what it can do to their business, right? So I believe that you have a challenge. At least here in Brazil, I have a challenge when I speak with executives here. I have a challenge to explain to them what kind of benefits they can have by investing on it. So, but I think that it's not just in Brazil. I believe that it's a worldwide problem. I don't know if you agree with that.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And I think, you hit the nail on the head. It is a mindset, and if you think about like leadership within sports organizations, they are used to delivering sport, that's their bread and butter. They know how to sell players, buy players. They know how to develop athletes. They know how to go to competitions. They know how to get subsidies from the government to organize events. This is what they're used to as an industry. And now you're telling them to do something else because the world is changing. And so this is why it takes time. But I believe like any shift that needs to happen, you need to educate, you need to inform and inspire. And so we spend a lot of our time actually, discussing with people like yourself, organizing meetups and webinars, writing a lot of articles, just because the topic is so early in our industry, and we need to talk about it to define what innovation means for us as an industry. And so this is a conversation we need to have over a long period of time. Similar to if you look at maybe 10 to 12 years ago when social media was just about to start, it was very new, so communications within a sports entity was about press releases and signing partnerships. It wasn't about a daily engagement, but then social media started to come in, and it took a few years until now it's probably quite standard to have somebody within a sports entity to deal with social media. In the future, that will be kind of the innovation and digital transformation side, which will become, I think, as commonplace as social media.
Absolutely, I totally agree. So one of the things that you mentioned that I think it's pretty interesting is the fact that a lot of times those executives, they think that to be innovative, or they have to have a budget. But how can they be innovative without having a budget to do it, or at least a reasonable budget to do it?
Yeah, so I think we're moving a little bit away from like individual agendas or organizational agendas that are singular-minded. Now you have a very collaborative approach, very partner-oriented approach, and so I think this is probably the best way to enter any new space. So last month, and we just published this article on our website as well, where a football club in Germany wanted to get into esports. And the best way for them to do that was to partner with somebody who's already established in esports and use that as a way to learn over time. I think in the case of sports entities that want to get into innovation, it's good to start talking about it, asking others who have done it, and then partnering in any different way with organizations that have a very innovation-minded agenda. And then the other point I would make is innovation is about bringing as many ideas internally and then making, kind of cooking them into something that's very valuable for the entity. And so this requires not a top-down approach, but like a collective approach from the entity as a whole. So whereas sometimes decisions come from the top, let's do this, comes down. I think innovation needs to be like a collective effort by the organization. So you need to involve your marketing team, you need to involve your IT team, you need to involve your sports science team, and you need to find a way to make this relevant for each of them. So when you're talking to the marketing, it's like, how can we create more assets for you to sell. When you're talking to IT, how can we bring you the best kind of transparent systems for the whole organization to work? When you're talking to the sports science team, how can I make your life easier as a coach or as a nutritionist or a physiotherapist? These are the questions that we need to answer as a group. What can we do, right? So I think this type of consultative approach is one that doesn't cost money, it costs time, but that can be integrated into any, I think, board level agenda.
Perfect. And one of the examples of innovative initiative, you did a startup challenge with the Basketball EuroLeague. What is the importance for sport entities to work closely with startups, in your opinion?
I mean, we were talking about it earlier. It's about the mindset, right? So if you have an interest in learning about the new trends in the market, you need to work with the ones that are creating that market. You know, so today, I think more than any time in our history, it's like this: you can create a company. Like this, you can set it up. You have access to all the cloud storage you need. You have access to websites that cost nothing to make. You can generate a company in many different jurisdictions and be global suddenly. So I think because of that, you have an explosion of amazing entrepreneurs coming into the market with ideas that are sometimes new to the sports industry. You know, some of them, they're just passionate about sports, or they haven't worked in sports, but somebody told them, like, why don't you apply that to sports? And so all of these novel ideas are coming from this amazing entrepreneurial energy. And I think this one needs to be brought closer to us as a sports industry, right? And so that's why, you know, startup challenges or going to conferences where startups are available or are showcasing their technology is a great way to understand kind of what next and how should we be thinking, and also to, again, reduce the time of developing new products. You know, so instead of me in-house trying to create a CRM system, let me go and find the best CRM. Instead of me trying to create an athlete management system and pay for its maintenance and upgrading over years, let me work with the best athlete management system out there today. You know, so we're able now to break down a lot of the, let's say, business requirements into best-in-class solutions that exist on the market in a very competitive way. You know, so it's not about just plugging and making our IT system bigger, but rather finding the best pieces. So you're building a Lego IT architecture instead of just one big blob that you grow over time and it becomes very difficult to integrate with external solutions. So yeah, startups for me are like a great way to understand how things could be done better. And also that energy, I think, that startups bring and that entrepreneurs bring is something that's missing sometimes in sports entities, which are a bit slower and, you know, take time to decide, and, you know, they work on 3-4 year cycles because that's how long their broadcast rights are or their Olympic cycles are. So they don't have that kind of quarter to quarter, I'm gonna die if I don't get the next sale in, which is something that startups, I think, bring to the equation.
And talking specifically about startup challenges or accelerator programs, what a program like that should have in order to be successful, and not only a media initiative, in your opinion?
Yeah. So instead of for it not to be like innovation theater, you know, that's to avoid that happening, it's important to understand kind of the overall strategy. And the overall strategy for innovation should identify the business requirements. You know, why are we doing innovation in the first place? What do we want to innovate on? And once you identify that, you know, whether it's kind of like fan engagement, whether it's athlete performance or athlete welfare, you know, sometimes you just want to make sure athletes can play for longer without injuries, extend their careers. Once you've identified that, it becomes easier then to choose what the startup challenge is about, you know. And now you see, whereas maybe 5 years ago, every sports tech challenge was about everything. Now you have very specialized ones about betting and one about esports and some about cycling and some about football. So this, I think, business requirements need to be clear for these startup challenges to be successful. And then once they're clear and there is a business need that we're trying to fill, it means that there's a department or an internal stakeholder or one of the partners that will be served by these solutions. And so once that link is available, then it becomes easy to kind of keep these initiatives going, because everybody sees why it's interesting for them. And actually, I want to know the next startup challenge who's going to come, because it's going to help me increase my sponsorship value, or it's going to help me increase the value I bring to my athletes. So this I think is very important. So strategic direction first, but then more concretely, like business requirements should be identified before launching these.
And I believe that also human resources internally to deal with those startups, because if you just bring the startups and you don't have anyone to work directly with them, you won't get anything, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, you do need also people that understand startups. This is, everybody understands what a startup is, but to manage communications with them, to understand which ones are valuable. Sometimes you have a great presentation, but has the product market fit been identified? Has it been showcased, validated? These things, sometimes you need somebody who understands startups a bit more. And so the human resources angle, as you mentioned, it's very important, and to place these initiatives very clearly in the organization. So eventually you should have like an innovation department, but until that happens, you need to place these initiatives somewhere. And usually it's with somebody who can interact and find these business requirements from one side, and then the matching process with the startups on the other side. Yes.
Perfect. So changing a little bit the subject now, N3xt Sports also launched a digital transformation fund with the Basketball EuroLeague. Could you explain a little bit about that initiative too, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So the EuroLeague Basketball is a governing body for a number of permanent clubs and a number of temporary clubs that come in every season across Europe. And one thing that they recognized was that digital transformation is very important to itself as a league, but also to all of the clubs, so that they can understand who their fans are, target them better with sponsors, sell them tickets at the right time, etc. So they dedicated a certain amount of money that they want to invest into their clubs, but they were not sure where to start in terms of like what need is more important or should be prioritized within each club, because they have them at different levels. So what we came in to do was a league-wide assessment on all the clubs to figure out where they stand in their digital maturity, and so like how do they have their CRM in place, what technology stack do they work with, what IT suppliers do they work with, how do they sell their tickets, do they have Wi-Fi in the stadium. It was a series of questions that we went through with each of the clubs. And then based on these, we developed assessments, kind of like report cards that were given then to the clubs to decide where they would invest their next Euro if they were to receive a Euro from EuroLeague Basketball. So with this in mind, and this kind of like, let's say, starting point in mind, then they were able to apply the right apply for the right type of project with EuroLeague Basketball. And so now our role is to kind of help that program move forward. And it's a 2-year program where they're looking to distribute a certain number of funds to each of the clubs to improve their digital maturity.
Perfect. And so each club will have its own demands attended, right?
Exactly. Each one knows where they're weak and where they're strong, and where the best next Euro should be spent. And so that's what they apply then to the EuroLeague Basketball's Digital Transformation Fund for.
Perfect. And do you have the idea to invest in some startups too, or not?
You mean EuroLeague Basketball?
Yeah. I'm sorry. Yes.
Yeah. So EuroLeague Basketball, they've been running the Startup Challenge now for 3 years. And there have been a number of them that they've started to work with in terms of kind of like just a commercial agreement, right? To bring them to either their Final Four or to take them to some of their clubs. And because now they're close to startups, they do think about investments. And that's kind of like the next evolution, is to think about like what is possible, not only like by partnering with startups to bring them to our clubs, but also to take leverage them and grow them in the European market and then beyond as well.
Okay, so changing the subject again, you live in the US, but as you mentioned, Next Sports also has a good presence in Europe, in the Middle East. What are the differences that you see today between the American innovation sports tech ecosystem and the European one?
It's more advanced here in the US. It started I would not say many years ago, but more years, like 5 to 6 years ago. You saw the first sports tech accelerator with Stadia Ventures being launched. You saw RGA set up an accelerator with the LA Dodgers maybe 5 years ago now. So it's more mature, I would say, in the US. And what's interesting about the US specifically is that the pro teams are surrounded by big business people, that have been in technology or real estate or any types of business. And so they're already in the innovation mindset, in the investment mindset, in the startup and tech mindset. So I think it's more natural here in the US. Whereas in Europe, I think there are many now initiatives popping up, which is great. Every day it seems like there's a new kind of hackathon or open innovation challenge or startup incubator or accelerator being set up. And so I think that's is becoming very how do I say, like each country is doing its own thing, and there's not yet a European-wide innovation initiative, I would say. So there is space for that. There is space for like a European-wide one. Whereas in the US, you kind of access the market just by being here, So I think Europe is probably 2 to 3 years behind the US, and we'll see that maturity come in the next 2 or 3 cycles. You'll also see like the investment side of things, I think, get a bit more deep in Europe, because now you don't have the ticket sizes, for example, in Europe are much smaller for investing in startups, and there's less investment funds in general focused on sports tech. So all of these things take time to build, and so yeah, those are the main changes, differences I see between the two.
Talking about Brazil now, we have a startup ecosystem that is growing a lot. We have a lot of VCs from all over the world that are investing here in Brazil, but our sports tech ecosystem is still not well developed enough. What do you think Brazil could do to develop its sports tech ecosystem?
Yeah, that's a very good question, Felipe. I mean, if you look at it, it's really about an ecosystem, right? So it's not one startup or one investor or one sports entity or one incubator or accelerator. It's really about building an ecosystem. And so I think the important thing to do is to start creating those links between the different entities, and then try to bring a bit of transparency to the market. So something that's worked very well in the US and in Europe is you know where the money is going, you know what people are investing in, you know which startups are getting what funding, you know what sports entities are looking for with these startup challenges, for example. So I think this transparency is important. And so what you're doing, for example, with your webinars is, I think, a great way to unsurface these initiatives and bring a bit of visibility to all of them. So I think this is one of the first steps, is to raise awareness, and raise transparency. We need numbers. We need to understand the players. We need to understand people's policies. We need to understand the buying habits of different organizations. So in sports, we know very well there is broadcast rights, drive conversations, So thinking about those, bringing them to the light, makes it more useful for startups, for example, to pitch. So if I know, for example, the Brazilian League of Handball is going to renew its rights in 2022, then that gives me time to kind of test it with maybe a handball club, and then with the handball federation, and then to bring it to kind of the league, So this type of transparency, I think, is very important. In Europe and the US, it's kind of part of business to be it's very visible. They talk about it a lot. It's always happening. Brazilian, I don't know it myself very well, but I'm sure there are people like yourself or entities that are looking to bring that visibility up.
Yeah, we are trying to start something here, so I hope that soon we'll have some news here, some some kind of improve in the sports tech ecosystem in Brazil. I hope so.
Absolutely.
Hisham, what are the technologies that you think have the highest potential to disrupt the sports industry?
Highest potential to disrupt. Yeah, I mean, there are many of them. I think, and I would say that what I'm excited about is computer vision. So the ability of cameras to understand immediately what's happening in the images in front of it and start to collect data on that, because today, aside from football and maybe basketball and volleyball, but even then not to the highest extent, you don't have any data flowing from the game very automatically, So I think this will drive a lot of engagement on the first hand, but also then kind of improve the sports performance side, improve the talent development side, and once these kind of, because the investment usually happens at the elite level, but then these frameworks they filter down, and as you kind of bring each technology down from one level to the next, it becomes a way of improving that layer. So you go from elite level to kind of the youth level to the talent identification level. And computer vision, I feel, could really unlock so many different talent that today is not being picked up because the scouting system doesn't have that reach, or it's based on, like one coach, he knows how a player should be developing, and so they don't really look for specific qualities that are different. So that's one thing I'm really excited about. I think it has, like I said, like a business angle, but also like a sporting angle. Beyond that, I think, we talk about data in general being very interesting. There's the AI and the machine learning and whatnot, but I feel like data visualization is something that we underestimate as an industry, because we need to explain things in our terms again. It needs to be explained in our language, and so data visualization at the end is, I think, the best way. I was reading an article recently, I think it was with Andy Robertson, who was a player in Liverpool, and they were asking him a question about data, because Liverpool has been kind of championing that data approach in football. And they asked him about how kind of they interact with the data team. And he said that at the end, the ideas are presented to them in videos, so even when all of the data is available and used for decision making, at the end, you need to bring it to a point where you give it to the end user. And data visualization is one of the ways that I think makes everything easier. So for me, computer vision, data visualization, but many more, but those are the two I would mention now.
It's kind of transforming data in information, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So Hisham, we are approaching the end now. So last question, what is the company's vision for the next 5 years? Where do you want to be in 5 years?
Listen, we're a young company. We started with the intention of, again, rebalancing that bargaining power within the industry. We want to be in a position to create new value in the industry. In terms of like our business model, today we're a consulting company, but we see that evolving to be a part of digital rights, data rights, to take part in kind of elevating the understanding of leaders around these issues through education, whatever shape that may take. We really are like quite business model friendly, so we see a lot of different ways of working with different partners in the market. But I would say like our geographic target is Europe, Middle East for sure, and then Asia. And then because we have like a Latin DNA with our Spanish co-founders and being in Barcelona, Latin America is always like a target for us, even though like we haven't really started to spend too much time on it yet, but definitely we see a lot of growth there. So that's what I would say. One thing which is clear to us, at least in the next 12 to 18 months, is focusing on digital transformation. which we have in the last, I would say, 12 months in a very kind of deliberate way. We want to kind of expand our capabilities there, work on solutions that are novel for sports entities, and really to drive up their media rights in the next cycle at least.
Perfect. So, Hisham, thank you so much for being here. It was great. Thanks for sharing your knowledge with us. I would like to give you space to send our audience a message.
Yeah, no, thank you, Felipe. Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be speaking to kind of the Brazilian sports tech enthusiasts and the market. You know, I'm really happy to be invited to speak to you, and I'm sure you guys are doing amazing stuff. I would say please reach out, find me on LinkedIn, let us know what you guys are doing. We'd love to find a way to, you know, give you guys visibility as well in Europe and the Middle East and all the work we're doing. So thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, thank you. So I'll speak a little bit of Portuguese now, okay?
Ok, obrigado.
Então, pessoal, esse foi o Hisham Shehabi, ele que é cofundador e COO da N3xt Sports, uma das consultorias mais bacanas que a gente tem hoje quando o assunto é inovação no esporte. Vocês viram aqui a aula que ele deu sobre esse assunto. Então, o Hisham, ele mora em Washington, como eu falei, a N3xt Sports tem uma presença nos Estados Unidos e na Europa, no Oriente Médio, então eles estão muito à frente do que acontece aqui no Brasil hoje, então a gente precisa justamente, esse é o objetivo aqui da Enzima, conversar com essas pessoas que estão em locais que estão mais à frente do que o Brasil está hoje, para a gente colher essas boas práticas e tentar implementar aqui para que a gente cresça também o nosso ecossistema aqui no Brasil. Como eu falei, é o que a gente tenta fazer aqui no Enzima Live Show, nessas lives. Essa não é uma live, né, essa gravada, mas nessas lives que a gente faz toda terça e toda quinta. Então, só lembrar a vocês, antes de me despedir, como eu falei, toda terça, toda quinta-feira, às 16 horas, aqui no canal da Pluri no YouTube, a gente tem um Enzima Live Show, recebendo convidados relevantes do mercado, como o Hisham, para compartilhar o conhecimento deles conosco, e depois essas conversas viram podcasts nas principais plataformas de podcasts, como o Spotify, o Deezer e o Google Podcasts. Muito obrigado pela presença de vocês e até a próxima edição aqui do Enzima Live Show. Tchau, tchau.